I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6:04 p.m. and the first agenda item is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next agenda item is correspondence, visitors, and public comments. And where's the sign-in sheet?
It's back with Jen has it.
Oh, okay.
Jennifer Bailey. I'm from Swanton, and my kid goes to MVU. I'm not going to repeat everything I said at the last meeting, but I still feel those points are still important, and I will speak on a few things. Since school year has started, the habits of work are being part of the way the grades are going to be factored, and I've spoken to several students, and I guess it depends on the class you're in and how many standards are going to be addressed in the first quarter. But for some kids, the habits of work could be 25% of their grade, and for some kids, it could be 50% of their grade. So that's concerning. As far as getting grades only twice a year, if I understand it correctly, at the end of the year for a full year course and at the end of the first semester, if it's a semester course. I went back and watched some of the past school board meeting where this was discussed, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around how, as for high school, you wouldn't be getting your grades every quarter. And so, like, how are you gonna know where you're at in order to make any changes you want to make or achieve any goals you want to achieve by the end of the year? And after rewatching, I realized that the references, or the majority of the references used to come up with this type of thinking for this report card was stated that it was middle school stuff. So in my opinion, I don't think middle school and high school should be considered the same at all, because colleges really only care about your high school grades. And so taking some middle school reporting and how they do it and trying to make that work for high school, I just don't think that's fair to the student or the parent, because as a parent, I want to know what my kid's grade is every quarter. And my son's a student that strives to get the 4 by the end of the year. And so he really wants to know what his grade is throughout the year as well. One other thing was, we've heard over and over the parents in our group and the numbers growing. I think when Habits of Work came, part of the discussion, we gained 10 more parents in our group. So the big thing was, we've asked for a lot of changes for over the years and really haven't seen much movement in that direction of things that we wanted to see. And we keep being told, like, well, we can't change it because it'd be too disruptive to the students. But yet they did make changes. And those changes aren't things that were even discussed with the parent group. They just went and made them, and we don't agree with them. So I just found it interesting that they will say that they can't make changes, but yet they do. And I also found it interesting that a lot of parents don't know anything about the habits of work being factored into the grades, because there was no messaging that really went out. When we got all those papers at the beginning of the year, even before the school year started, where you get the calendar and all that stuff, you think it would have been explained to the parents how they were going to grade this year, but it's not. And I get a lot of people asking me, like, I'm some sort of expert, and I'm really not, and I'm not claiming to be. I've just put a lot of time into trying to figure it out myself. And I guess the last thing is most of the new members to our group, the biggest question they have for me is show me how the school has shown you that this is better, more improved way of doing grading. Nobody's denying that maybe the teaching style should have its work. Proficiency grading. But we all want to know, how is the grading better being done this way? And I know I personally have asked the school on several occasions in the last 3 years, just show me the statistics, show me the proof. We've given you examples of how we don't think it's better, but I'm not seeing any sort of facts on how it is better. I guess that's where I'm at. I still have the same concerns as I did the last meeting. And the school year has begun and they're being implemented, so still have those concerns.
Thank you.
I don't know if anyone else.
Does anybody else would like to make any comments? Okay. Thank you very much. Next is the agenda review.
The only thing I would say is you had said we may not need executive session.
Oh, yeah. Item number 10, that we probably won't need executive session. I'm just going to do a quick little thing, and we're going to continue it on. All right. And next, we have approval for the minutes of August 22nd, 2023. Would anybody like to make a motion?
I'll move to approve the minutes from August 22nd.
Thank you, Peter. Do I have a second? Thank you, Renick. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of approving the minutes of August 22nd, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
And I will abstain,
Okay.
and looks like Devin was to abstain.
All right, so motion carries 602.
Well, 702
7.
because Megan's here too.
Oh, she is. Okay, great. Thank you. I'll put that down that she's here. All right. Next agenda item is administrative reports. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Dan?
And Christy.
And Christy.
She's this way.
I have a question. The weight room is currently can't be used, correct? Or-
There's no equipment in it. It's essentially an empty space right now. We're still waiting for the equipment to arrive, which should be here next week.
But even with that, it's not going to be used till.
One of the I hate to call it stipulations, but for money from the gift was that once it's all in there and all set, like nobody's supposed to go in and use it until they come in and show us how to use it. And the opening of that will be on October 19th.
19th.
Yep, at 9:30 in the morning. So Governor Scott, Jake Steinfeld from Body by Jake, the person who's in charge of the Get Fit program, will be here to help open it. So there'll be like an all-school, well actually it's a middle school assembly because the grant was geared towards middle school. And then we'll have like a demonstration of students using the equipment.
You said that's the 19th of October.
Yes, yep, at 9:30.
Any other questions for Christy or Dan? Okay.
I guess I would ask Dan, any feedback on the sign?
No, not really, not much. It's, we get a little bit of feedback around just making sure that the messaging isn't too much because
You can't
as
read.
you drive by it, you've only got about 2.5 seconds. Some people maybe even a little less around time to observe the sign as they go by it. But it's, just making sure that the message is small, or is large enough and there's not too much verbiage on the sign to read it. But feedback's been good.
That's what I heard too.
Is there too much in the message?
I don't think it's too much, but it was too small. So like, I said to this person, well, maybe they could. I mean, you're not going to see. The alternative is to make things bigger, but then more screens, which you wouldn't see. But I think that feedback was they would prefer that. because they go by that sign 4 or 5 times a week at least. So they might not see 2 of the screens on the first day they go by, but the second day, I think, and I tried to look at it close tonight, and it's kind of small, the wording.
Yeah.
But you could do that, right? You could make it bigger, but then
Yes.
you would have more
Right. You'd have more
screens to
screens.
cycle through.
Right, and we set the wait time on it at, I think, 8 seconds.
Yeah.
So it's, but every 8 seconds they rotate through.
You gotta be careful with that though, because V-Trans had a sign up there. It says, you drink, you drive. Must have said something after that, but all I saw was you drink, you drive.
Well, I go by the sign about 4 or 5 times a day, and I always catch it. And then if not on, on the second trip through, I'm always make sure I look at it. I think it's pretty spiffy.
Yeah, looks good. I think we're still trying to find that sweet spot of how much to be able to put on it, and how much is too much of what somebody can read as they go by it. The current example is the 4 winners from the state FFA. It has their names on it, and it's tough because it is smaller, but you're trying to cram all that information on there, letting them know why they're there, and you want to recognize the students, and it's hard to read. Yeah.
find that happy medium.
Just a comment.
that's it.
I was really pleased to see the emphasis on attendance.
Yep. I mean, and we've really, our in-service was really geared towards, discipline and listening to teacher feedback, and Jen and Christy and Sarah Gates and I, we had a lot of conversation this summer around, how do we deal with that, and taking people's feedback and listening to that, and changing some of the practices that we have. So.
I want to commend Christy too, because middle school is where it starts when you arrive here. It starts in pre-K. The pre-K people are listening, but I did, but good. Glad you're on top of it.
Megan?
Just circling back to the new board, did I see that it was broken in a section on the I guess if I'm staring at it on the right side?
Yeah.
Was there?
Yes, as you come in, yeah. That's been the third panel that we've had to have replaced. When we first set it up, there was one, and then later on there was another one on the other side. But it's unclear whether something was tossed at it or whether it just came undone. But
Okay.
yeah, but they replaced that.
Question.
Yeah, they replaced that. No charge to us.
Got it. All right. Thank you.
All right. Central office. Does anybody have any questions? Well, before that, happy birthday, Laura.
Do we have to say?
No.
We could.
That'd be in a minute.
Does anybody have any questions for the central office reports?
I always like to get an update on what's happening with that preschool. Do we know? We're pretty well, stable in our enrollments. Have they increased more than we expected, or where were we in our earlier program?
Did you hear that, Wendy?
I think she's frozen.
She's frozen.
I think she's just holding really still.
Any questions?
From what I understand, our enrollments are steady. We have the same number of classrooms as last year. We have 3-year-old classrooms and 4-year-old classrooms. And it sounds like the numbers are you back with us?
I am. Everybody froze for a minute. So I heard the start of what you said, Dawn, if we know anything about preschool, and then everybody froze. So I apologize.
Well, Julie just commented, I was asking about enrollments right now. I know it's early in the game, but are we looking pretty steady? Are we picking up maybe more than we expected?
Right now we're holding steady, and
She sure is.
Yeah.
fairly close to fully enrolled across all the classrooms.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments for central office? Peter?
Just like to hear more about looks like we've updated the website and what we're doing, what we're hoping for.
Yeah. Actually, Derek, you want to talk about that at all? Derek started the whole process in really bringing all of our websites, because they were all over the place, and not always as easy to find information. So we sort of asked Derek what he could do about it.
Yeah, so went through a pretty extensive search, and we landed on Edleo for a company so that we could have some consistency between our sites. We've got that piece down. We've got the beginning steps of it in place. Now we're really trying to build it out and really take it to the next step. Currently, it's a lot of manual work. We're updating the directories at each location, the pictures for staff, their job titles. A lot of manual labor. I had a lot of help with the tech staff. Philip has helped me quite a bit with that. The principals have been great, providing information about the schools that we can put on the sites. JR has been a huge piece of this. He's got the video and the photo piece. He can really bring our sites to, make them look really good. So he's been involved. It's been a lot of work, but had a lot of help and pleased with where it's at so far, but we got a lot more work to put into it.
Once you have it established where you want it, I guess who controls it? And the thing that in the past that I've seen is a lot of the time the stuff isn't current, so who's keeping it, up to date?
Yeah, so that was one of the things, one of our goals was to build in checkpoints throughout the year. So we want to be on top of it throughout the year. When there's special events, we want to put those on the site. But if we're falling behind, we're going to have checkpoints throughout the year so that we can make sure information's up to date, staff directory is up to date. I mean, every day information on there is changing. So if we're falling behind, we'll have those checkpoints built in. JR is going to be taking on the central office in Missisquoi, or the MVU sites. I'll be there as a backup. The tech staff are there as a backup as well. Franklin, Kathy, who is our tech support up there, really manages that site. Her and Joyce are really good about keeping their site up to date. And then Caleb is our tech person in Highgate. I'll be working with him in Yeshua. And that's a big piece of it, is working with the principals at each of the schools to get the information. One of the things that we have on the sites, we're tied into Google Calendars where we have all our events. So that's nice. We can not have to go into a website and change a website. We can update a calendar and those things will just show right up on the website. So we've made it all very easy to update our sites. We don't need to be web developers anymore. We can manage that in-house. So
It's a good project. I'm glad to see it because I think it'll keep the community and parents will trust the information more once they see that it's updated and current to what's going on.
I like them. They're definitely better. I think it's a step in the right direction.
one of the other things with the sites, I think 90% of the people that view them are going to be on a mobile device. And these sites are built to be viewed on mobile devices. So they'll scale down and they'll look really good on your cell phone or your tablet. So that's big.
I want to thank them for the amount of work. I attended one meeting with the developers, and then they talked about all of the detailed sort of trees of information that had to be, it was a heavy lift, and I appreciate the work that the team did to get that set up for us. And JR changed a lot with the design, which was really great. Just little things like, why is this round when everything else is oblong? And he has the eye, and he really helped us customize it for us.
Megan?
I just want to say thank you. It looks so much better. And as a parent, I especially appreciate the staff directory. I was trying to get a hold of my child's teacher, and I couldn't find them on the website. Thankfully, they have, Class Dojo, so I was able to connect with her that way. But this is really, really nice. So just thank you as the parent of the kid, not the school board member.
Any other questions or comments for central office, Devin?
We've talked a little bit about school ranking, MVU school ranking, and Julie, I noticed you had some information there about that. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Even though the school board was sort of passing that information back and forth, the U.S. News and World Report data came out. It's timed pretty closely when then the State Agency of Ed is updating their annual snapshot, which happened today. I haven't had a chance to look at it again, but I looked at it previously. There's 56 ranked high schools in Vermont, and we rank 23 above Colchester and just a few behind that other high school just down the street that we don't talk about that much. So, we've moved from nearer the bottom to right above the middle. So, and that is a combination of data from 2021 and some 2022. So it's not the most recent data. The most recent would be a year ago, last spring. So we feel pretty good about the work that's happening and the movement. A lot of it has to do with, we talk about career. And so, we've made some movement on the students taking SATs. We had this long conversation about it, but we've made some movement, and it's been positive for us. And we are not even remotely listed. There was a lot of drama last week with superintendents about the way the Agency of Ed announced the lowest performing schools in Vermont, because the agency doesn't always communicate in a timely way. It's usually 4 o'clock on a Friday, where you get a notice saying your school's been, but MVU is, performing well above that range and not on any lists anymore. It's been a long time since MVU has been on any of those lists, but it's been slow, progressive work over the past 15 years when the State Board of Education came and told MVU they had to change things. So I'm pretty proud of the work of the team here. And
Julie, do you know, I know budget, the RUPS.
Yeah.
Do you know them?
I don't have
I wanted
contact
to share
for them.
that with them.
Well, one of the things why I put it in this newsletter is because that goes on our website.
Yeah, I just don't know how to get in touch. I don't know them well at all, but maybe I'll go in the library and see it.
Yeah. I think it's just good to know.
Anybody else?
Jen, I would just like to say real quickly, thank you to Beth Ann Miller. I had the opportunity to attend the Heritage for Aviation, which partnered with the After School, and Congresswoman Ballot was there. So I did have an opportunity to meet her and also have a pretty good discussion with the director of staff and kind of highlight some things that we're doing in the district. So, if Beth Ann can explain a bit more about that, but just kind of thank you to that program and the opportunity, and really any way to kind of highlight what we're doing here and the work that we're doing.
Yeah, thank you for being there. It was really great. We've been partnering with Habitat for Aviation over at the Franklin County Airport for several summers now. And Beth White and I have been working kind of behind the scenes to increase our presence with the airport essentially throughout the school year, not just doing a one-week summer program. But, we are a unique district in the sense that we've got an airport right there and they want to work with us. And they've been doing some really incredible work in the community and statewide. So when Congresswoman Ballot was there, MVSD was invited to attend and sort of represent how we collaborate with them. And it was a fantastic day. I thought it was a really nice way for us to share not only what we've done, but, you know, the many opportunities we have ahead of us, especially as the airport goes through the renovations it's going through and it continues to have a larger presence in the state. So essentially it was a really great day, a nice way to kind of get to know people around the community in the state, and I think it was a success. And I'm looking forward to trying to create a stronger partnership throughout the school year.
Thank you.
All right.
Jen?
Yes.
Before we leave, I think it must be just a typo or I'm out of alignment, but if you go back to Tasha's report about new teachers, she says, I'm trying to find it here now, but she says something about October 16th.
I saw that too.
Yeah.
Yes,
Is that just a
right.
typo?
We have new teacher days, and so I'm not sure if that's.
It says, right here, it says, we had a wonderful district day with our new teachers on October 16th, following a very successful.
Oh,
I think it was supposed to be
August, it was August.
Okay.
Yeah.
I read it and I said, she must have, and then I said, well, maybe that's last year's report.
Nope, no, it's October. We do have future days with them, but I think October's too soon. I think we do it in the winter.
All right. And then next agenda item is the update on the EEE virus.
Yes, I just wanted to notify you all. I was able to send out a message to parents and staff today. The Department of Health identified Swanton and Alberg as a hotspot for the EEE virus, the Eastern Equine Encephalitis virus. And at first they wanted us to shut the whole county down at dusk, but we gave some feedback to the Department of Health and they listened and they took a hotspot approach. So I don't know that it will make much of a difference for events, except we may move some things indoors. We may schedule, if a soccer game was going to be at 5, it might be a little earlier, but it should be fine as long as the hotspot stays where it is and doesn't spread. I have heard that they may be doing some spraying in Swanton and Alberg, which may help. And of course, as soon as there's a hard frost, the mosquitoes will be dead, apparently. Though they seem to always come, it feels like they come back. I mean, but it is, so I sent a message out with a link to the Department of Health. They have a nice website that kind of talks about what the risk is, and you can track, like, if it moves. They test mosquito pools all over the region every day and collate that information. And just wanted to make sure people were aware, wear long sleeves if you're outside. We're, try not to have kids out at dusk with any of our activities, but we wanted to make sure, hopefully this will be a short-lived, but as soon as a mammal is involved, then they know that it can transmit to humans. So that's all I had. Could have been a bigger deal. We hope that it's not.
All right, thank you. All right, next agenda item, presentations and discussion terms. The first one is the report card update, please.
All right, well, we are excited to bring a mock-up of what the report card will look like. We have to do, in order to create the mock-up, we have to use last year's data. So there are some things. Do you want a hard copy? So there are some things.
Christy, is this available on the drive?
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
I believe she said she put it in the folder. There's a document that says the title is Proficiency-Based Learning, Grading, and Reporting Website Components. It's linked in there.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Do you have one more?
Do you have one more?
I don't, but I can.
Yes, you do.
We do.
Yeah, we need more than one more. Yeah.
So I'll give you a second just to look that over, and then I will talk about it and refer to some of the things that we talked about last time I was here. And we have less to show.
Megan, were you able to find it and get into it? Because I want to make sure you can see it.
Why don't I share
No,
it?
I don't see it up
I
here.
can share that link directly. I can
Thank you.
Oh, no, there it is. Open that.
Is it just like right in front of my face and I can't see it?
I'm gonna send you an email, Megan.
Thank you.
Kelly, were you able to get into it?
I'm not either. I'm looking.
Can you send one to Kelly
Yep.
too, please? Thank you.
All right, so visually you can see that it looks very different than
I know.
our previous one.
I just want to make sure they can get into it.
I haven't actually sent the link yet.
Okay.
Oh.
I was thinking so fast. Now and
Here, I just linked it in the agenda in your board folder.
And Jen just hit send on the email too, so it's easier to go there.
Got it. Okay, good.
Excellent.
Megan?
Got it. Thank you so much.
Excellent.
And I will put it on the screen now that I found it again.
Thank you. So if you look at the top, there's the student name, grade, and counselor, right? This is actual data from last year, so we redacted the student name. And any comments. There's no identifiers on here. We have that attendance piece right up front at the top. That's overall school attendance. A description of the proficiency-based report card. And then we added the report card proficiency key, right? This was one of the pieces that we heard was causing some confusion. People weren't sure how to, so if they had a 3, they weren't sure what that meant, what that looked like in a traditional grading scale. So we have the grading equivalents on the side, plus a brief description about each of those ranges. So the entire top is new and looks very different from the report cards we've put out in the past. From there, there's a little blurb about school-wide habits of work. So it says what they are. Those will show up in other places, but that is a description of them. So if you look at, so this first page, you can see the habits of work are still scored as for this particular student as consistently, right? That is going to change. But we had to use data from last year, and we can't go back in the last year and change the data that's already there. So we couldn't change that from consistently to a 3, right? But I do, at the end of this, there is an example of what it will look like moving forward. But we added in the shading, we added in the overall, the absences for each class, right? So you see CP biology standards, then it has the total absences and total tardies. And then if you go down past the habits of work, You see CP biology, science and engineering practices, and then those are indicators, right? The next 4 are indicators. And the cross-cutting concepts, and the next 4 are indicators. And we printed out the whole report card using last year's data. But probably it's easier if you flip to the last page. Where we took just global studies and we mocked up what global studies will look like moving forward. So we didn't do the whole report card. That would have been a lot of work for maybe not that big bang of a buck. But if you look at global studies, that is what each course will look like moving forward. So it starts with global studies that has the instructor. I just threw my name in there. I should have put Dan's. With the student absences, right? This particular student was not tardy or absent last year. And then the overall course grade for global studies, right? That was one of the things that we heard, that it was hard to know what the overall course grade is. That is different for middle and high school. There is no overall course grade in middle school. Right? So that will be on the high school version. It will not be on middle school. It will not say overall course grade. From there, you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shaded boxes. Problem solving, geography, civics, history, and habits of work. Those are the critical proficiencies. So last time we were here, we talked a little bit about reporting out on those critical proficiencies, not at the indicator level. Right, so those are the critical proficiencies. So problem solving, I can help my community solve problems in a variety of ways. And then there's a score there. Go down to habits of work, and then it breaks down habits of work into the 3 different indicators there. And then there's a comment section, which may have been part of a previous report card, but wasn't utilized. And this global studies example will happen for each subject that the student takes. Okay. So I just went down my list of things last time I was here that we talked about, right? Moving toward report cards at the end of semester 1 and semester 2. Expanding the key portion at the top of the report card to include more detailed information. Use of shading and borders and spacing to better define sections for courses. Create and use comment sections to provide descriptions and more qualitative information. Add attendance. Include descriptions of the critical proficiencies, including the habits of work, and include the overall course grade. So I'm hoping, and I certainly will open it up for questions now, but I'm hoping what we brought last time, you can see in this example. And if not, let me know, because maybe I can point it out.
All right, I just want to make sure I'm clear.
Yeah.
So basically, this top portion here
Yes.
is what we want to pay attention to, and then each class will be labeled like this right here.
Yes.
And that'll be for, okay. So the rest was just an example, and these are the 2 pieces that going
Yes.
forward it's gonna.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Megan has her hand up.
Oh, sorry, Mike.
One quick clarifier. So for middle school, we'll just have the semester 1, semester 2 grades. Is that correct?
Yes. You will get
Okay.
at the end of the first quarter, right? You'll get a progress report, and then at the end of third quarter, you'll get a progress report. But on the report card, it'll be just semester 1 and 2. Yeah.
Okay. And thank you for these updates. I am very happy with how open you guys were to incorporating this scale, the scale between our proficiency score and our traditional grading scale. I think that is going to be incredibly helpful for parents and family members, just to see what that means in our brains. You know, we were raised and have been inundated with the traditional grading scales our whole life. So I think having this sort of bridge to help us understand what this is and what this means is super helpful. So I really appreciate you taking that into account. I do have a question about the habits of work and how, you know, I know some concerns were raised about using that in the grading due to it being a bit more subjective. So I was just wondering if you could speak on that a little bit more.
Yes, I'm probably gonna ask Jen to talk about it a little bit more than me, just because she did the training, but I do wanna say, that habits of work is the percentage of the habits of work is consistent across each class, right? So each course has the same critical proficiencies and so the same percentage, right? So if you're in global studies, right, the example that I gave, right, there's 4 critical proficiencies plus habits of work. And so that will be the same for all global studies students, right, which is all 9th grade students. Okay, so I know that that was confusing the last time we were talking about it, that the percentage might change based on the course, but it's based on the course. So it's consistent across that course. So everyone in global studies has the same percentage of habits of work. Does that make sense?
So does that mean that?
Yeah.
Or did I make it more confusing?
No, I was just trying to, so does that mean like in global studies, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 habits of work, so does that mean it's 20% of the grade?
Yes.
And so is that consistent for all the courses where habits of works are included? So it's 20% of the grade?
No, that was the question. So that's not. It's consistent at each course level, but not across all courses in the building.
Different subject areas have different numbers of critical proficiencies. So, for example, in English language arts, there are 4 critical proficiencies. And so the addition of habits of work becomes a 5th critical proficiency. That's 20%, which is similar to what you see in global studies. Science has 3 critical proficiencies, so the addition of habits of work as another critical proficiency makes habits of work worth 25%. The subject areas have, even the documents we're getting from the Agency of Education, vary from content area to content area about the recommended number of critical proficiencies.
So it looks like in French, this French 2 has 1 category. So would that imply that the habits of work are 50% of the overall grade?
So that was a concern, and I worked with the foreign language department to revisit their critical proficiencies and how they were organized, looking at the standards. A lot of the original work that we did around this is 7 or 8 years old now, and how we organized things originally. So with the addition of critical proficiencies in some subject areas, we've been going back and making sure that's a little bit more balanced. So the work that I did with foreign language, they are now at 4 critical proficiencies without habits of work, so 5 with habits of work. Most are ranging between 17.5% and 25%. I see very few outliers beyond that.
What are your thoughts on having that variation?
I think that in any content area, the critical proficiencies are divided equally among the grade. That's how we have it set up. And that habits of work are a critical proficiency. So I think it's in alignment with how, with the work that we've done around how those grades are calculated.
Megan, did you have another question?
Yeah, so I guess my concern is the habits of work seem very subjective, whereas the other critical skills are not. They're very, okay, can this student understand opportunities, roles, and rules in my community? For civics and geography, those seem very, I don't know, there is a very easy way to demonstrate this, and it's a yes, no, somewhere in between. I feel like habits of work, especially, if something is going on in a student's home life that might impact those, it makes me nervous that it could be up to 25% of their grade. Am I thinking about this in the wrong way, or I guess that's my concern, that it could be up to a quarter of somebody's grade that, either stuff is going on in their life, or maybe I don't know, that there's a dissonance between the student and the teacher, anything like that could have some sort of influence on it that's just too subjective.
So I can speak to that a little bit. The habits of work that we identified are, and I have some copies of the rubric here, the most recent one. The habits of work that we identified are based in the Vermont transferable skills, which have been, around for about 10 years. We prioritized them at the beginning of this work, so they're not new. So the same 3 habits have been prioritized for almost 10 years now. We had an original 4-point rubric that we used in our first year. We gathered some feedback around that, and then we moved to the system we were previously using with the descriptors about how frequently students were demonstrating those behaviors. The work that we did in the spring is we took those 3 habits of work that we had used previously, that we were receiving a lot of feedback from teachers that they were not, the way that we were using them was not helping students build those skills. And we were getting feedback from students through their actions that it was not important to them. So those were some of the things that we took into consideration. Some of the pieces of habits of work are things that the parent group identified as being important as well. And then we took the existing ones and we did a crosswalk with them between the MVSD SEL competencies. We identified where in those competencies the habits of work displayed. We also did a crosswalk with the portrait of a graduate. So we took the existing work that we were doing and we aligned it with some of the newer work that we've been doing across the district. We have a school-wide rubric. We spent a good deal of time in service looking at the new school-wide rubric. And we put it out for feedback in the spring and over the summer, and we incorporated some of that feedback as well. And during in-service, we had teachers meet in their data teams, their PLCs, to discuss how they would not just score this skill, but how they would instruct for the skill in their particular setting, right? Because the thing that is a little bit tricky about this is we want consistency and we don't want it to be subjective, but what it looks like to be persistent in math class is not the same as what it looks like to be persistent in chorus, right? There are different ways that you demonstrate that skill. So we spent time talking about the context of classes, how you would instruct for that skill, how you would have students practice that skill, and then how you would assess that skill for students in the class. And we're going to continue to revisit it because I hear your concern. These skills are also the things that we keep hearing from employers, the community at large, that they want students to be able to do these things. and that they aren't always able to do them.
Thank you.
Peter?
I have a question on the global studies example that you made up. So you've got the overall course grade for global studies, and then you've got the 5 core principles. But I noticed in semester 1, we have a blank for problem solving in civics. Does that mean that wasn't gone over in that semester? Or, because obviously it didn't count as part of the grade.
So the data appears when it's addressed in time. So that standard wasn't addressed in the first semester. It was addressed later in the year. So wherever you see a blank means that that standard hadn't been taught during that time period.
So in semester 2, all the standards were taught.
In this example, yes.
Also, sometimes it might not be.
Sometimes it might not be.
Okay.
Depends on the content area. In some content areas, certain standards are revisited throughout the year. For example, the writing standards that they work on in English language arts. And in some content areas, standards are very isolated. For example, if you're using trig functions in geometry class for right triangle trig, that's going to be isolated to that unit. It's not necessarily going to appear again.
Thank you.
So I just have a couple questions. One, I understand the complexity of this, right? Because any small change affects a lot, and obviously it's a lot of work, and it's not just on one person. So whenever I ask questions, keep that in mind. And help me walk me through this. So based on this, right, like, so proficiency and then habits of work, is it possible that we get in a scenario where, like, student A, who's trying really hard and not grasping the material really, is rewarded by trying and doing more, but if we have student B, who is, like, mastered the material and understands it, but may or may not be engaged, they could both end up with the same grade?
Technically, yes. Right now, or last year, we had those systems separated from each other. We typically see that habits of work do impact a student's ability to master the content. There's usually a connection there. There isn't always. In a traditional grading system, those things would have been factored together at a very arbitrary amount, depending on the classroom teacher.
Yeah, and so my question is, like, if a certain amount of grading is subjective, depending on the subject already, so what was, what's the rationale behind adding it as its own block of, like, grading on top of the already subjectivity of proficiency grading already? Like, why? And I'm really just asking so I can understand.
Yeah, so when we started revisiting this in the spring, and I reached out to teachers for feedback and their views about what we should do, and presented a couple different options. The feedback we got overwhelmingly was that students were not prioritizing the habits of work because they weren't calculated into the grade. And so the coming to class, being on time, being prepared, sticking through with something when they were frustrated, those skills for many students, not all students, but for many students, were not a priority for them because we were reporting them separately and that they were not factored into the grade. And for a lot of students, because they didn't prioritize their habits of work, that meant that they were not being successful, which led to a great deal of intervention that teachers had to provide to get students to where they needed to be. So often, we have a flexible intervention time every day, which the intention is to be reteaching, having students practice the content and skills that they need to be mastering the content. And largely, we were seeing that those interventions were focused on you refused to engage in class today. You did not persist through this frustration or ask for help. A lot of the habits of work skills. Will we still need to intervene on those? Absolutely, because lots of students will need those. But because our reporting system was not prioritizing habits of work in the minds of students, they were not engaging in their coursework at the time that's provided with them, for them, as well as we would hope to gain everything they could from that lesson.
So that makes sense, but then like how are we gonna mitigate, because this is the first year we're doing it, right? To this percentage?
In this calculation, yes.
So then how are we going to like, mitigate when, a student says, I'm doing all the things, but this teacher just doesn't like it, right? Because I feel like that's inevitable. That you're gonna have students who are like, I'm doing everything, I know the work, and I showed up 5 minutes late, and next thing you know, I'm a 3, but I know the material. And I worry because I can see the benefit for like middle students where they can just work harder and show it, but already the difficulty with this is the students who are really, really doing well and excelling, it's harder for them to pop out. And then it's easier to kind of one thing and they get dinged for it. It becomes I should have been a 4, but me and the teacher just didn't get along. So how are we going to navigate that when we're making it such a big important grade?
Yeah, I can see your concern, and it was definitely like that 10 to 15 years ago, right? I covered my book, so I got some bonus points. I was late, I lost some points there. I think that we are working really hard to mitigate it by having common scoring rubrics. All of our data teams, they meet 2 to 3 times a week, and they plan their assessments together. Many of them calibrate it together. There really isn't a place for that sort of gotcha place to happen. I'm not naive enough to think that it might not somewhere, but structurally we work hard to minimize that by holding each other accountable and being transparent with the assessments and the rubrics that we provide.
I think what I really love about these kinds of rubrics is that you can sit down with a student who says that, right? Like, you scored me, you gave me a 2 because you don't like me, right? And I absolutely had people who said that in my classroom, right? And I would sit down and say, okay, so I monitor my progress toward my learning goals and I am engaged in class. Can you show me some evidence of that? And I'll talk about what evidence I have for why I put you there. So let's talk about that, right? And in my experience with students and teachers, that when someone can show me some compelling evidence that maybe I overlooked, right? I'm like, okay, let's bump you up there. You're right. Those are some things that I didn't think about. I didn't think about how you were persisting in that moment, right? I did these kinds of activities and I didn't see it there, but okay, I give it to you there. So I think that this gives us an opportunity to say, where is your evidence of that? What does it look like when you're doing that? Let's talk about that. And we shouldn't have to get to a report right before a student has something that says, this is where you kind of are right now, right? What do you need to do differently to get over here? And so I do think that this opens up, especially because we're using it everywhere, it opens up some really good conversations between teachers and students about what something looks like. And that was work that we actually just did the first couple weeks of school, right? What does it look like when we're engaged in class? What does it look like when we're being respectful? What does it look like? So, because we have these, so what does it look like when I am persisting or setting a goal or following through? What do those things look like? So I think it does give us lots of opportunity to have really good conversations with kids about what they're doing and what they aren't doing. And I think there's some really, really bright kids who really do struggle to persist when things get hard, right? Because they aren't hard very often. And so they need that little push. And they need to see it on a, I need to hand them back something that says, yeah, you don't really persist when things get hard. You kind of shut down. How are we going to get through that? Because when you go somewhere else, there's going to be hard things. You're not always going to be the top of the class. So I think that these offer us lots of opportunities to help kids figure out who they are as a learner and get better.
I have a question. So for every class that's going on because school started, you already have your percentages of the habits of work for that class, correct? So were the students made aware of this? Okay, I just want to make sure that the students were told habits of work is going to be 20% of your grade this year in my class, and that they understand what their habits of work are, that was outlined to them so that they don't come back and say, well, I didn't know. And I think it should be fair to them that it's set to them up front.
So what was one of the things that was connected to this work that we're doing is that we also made sure that each teacher was doing a syllabus for their course, right? And when it's, so a global studies course, the syllabus is the same for all the global studies courses, except that might have a different teacher's name at the top, right? So all of our teachers have submitted syllabi for their courses, and the grading piece is on this.
Yep.
I think that I like a lot of this. One of the things I like is the demonstrating by participating in class. Because I think if they have an incentive to participate, I mean, that's part of their grade, right? They're going to be helping other students. Because if they have to participate, they're not doing something else, fooling around, they're not paying attention, right? You got more students trying to, I mean, in theory.
Right. If they're motivated by a grade.
If they're motivated by a grade, they're going to be trying to participate in class. And they may be asking questions that someone else may not have thought of, or the question that they didn't feel comfortable asking, somebody else might ask that question. So you get more back and forth between the students and the teacher. And I think that's always a positive thing. Like I said, in theory, I think it's a great, I think, like you said, a lot of these responsibility, persistence, personal responsibility, they are all things that we need in life. And I don't know about grading or how we go about it, but if we can motivate our students to work towards these goals, I think it's a good thing.
If I could just add to that, Peter, I think that for a long time we've just assumed that students should have those skills by the time they get to us. And they don't necessarily. And so something that we're really trying to emphasize with this transition is that these are skills that need instruction, just like the content area skills. We cannot expect that all students are coming in with them. Some do have them already, and many do not. And they need instruction and they need practice to be able to get there. We can't just assume that they already know how to do these things.
I also think that's really setting them up for their future. If either they're going to go out into the workforce or they're going to go out into college. I know in college they get their syllabus, and a huge portion actually goes back to the habits of work is participating in class discussions. And some of them I've seen are actually 40% of their grade.
I think this rubric is good because it takes some subjectivity out, because there is a rubric. In my own experience, I've had a phone call or two on a student that I might be close with was slipping in one of her habits of work. So it would be nice, it would have been nice now, and maybe it existed but in a different manner. But now I know how to approach that as a parent a little bit better too. You know that you might, I got a phone call from your teacher and you're slipping in citizenship. Let's have a talk. And the conversation might go, well, what do you mean by that? And I said, well, you know that this is part now of your overall grade, and this is the rubric that you need to be aware of if you want to be at a certain level, or you want to be at the level that your parents are demanding you be at. So I think this is helpful to me as a parent. And yeah, it's interesting. I kind of like the habits of work as a percentage of the overall grade, because I had classmates in school that never did their homework, were always handing things in late, but aced their SATs. And then I was on the other end of the spectrum where I really struggled on my standardized tests, but I sort of considered, I would do my homework, and I think these things existed even when I went through school, because I remember a science teacher who really wanted us to keep a notebook and keep it neat, and it showed that we were taking notes. And it wasn't really demonstrating that we were mastering any skill, it was we were demonstrating that we were mastering a habit of work. So it was incorporated in the grades even then, I think. So I don't think, and then the overall climate of the school, I think this is also a tool to help improve that as well. I would think that's going to be a side effect of it. So overall, everything looks really good to me. I think it's great. I think the key at the front really will help as well. So
could you send this to Kelly and to Megan as well?
Sure. It is in your board drive, but what Jen shared with me is what she wants to have on a page of the school district, the school website, not the district website, so that it will be easy to find, what a transcript looks like, what a school profile looks like, what a sample report card looks like all of those things, and some videos about Power School and how to check your students' grades all the way through. So all of that will be on the website. It's just being built.
Just real quick, Jen, I just wanted to bring up the overall grades are.
We got a 3.5 in semester 2.
So the overall is, and so they can all be now?
The overall is, and the critical proficiencies are. The next layer below a critical proficiency is an indicator, and those are the content area skills that are assessed. Those are on a homework scale.
And just what was the reason for that?
Yeah, so I would say that there are multiple different reasons. A lot of the training that we've gotten over the past 15 years has really been about creating scales that describe, just like this one describes, levels of gained skill over time, right? The improvements that students can make to reach proficiency. I would say that the training and research that we have done has shown us that parsing out the levels in between, it's really not particularly useful, especially when the goal is proficiency. Really, in a truly proficiency-based system, you are proficient or you are not, right? You can do the skill or you cannot do the skill. This breaks it out into into different pieces along the way. There's also some research that shows that reliability in scoring actually decreases the more levels of performance that you have. So, for example, if I have a 4-point scale and I'm calibrating with the person who teaches the same course as I do, we are more likely to calibrate and assess a student the same score on a 4-point scale than if I double that by having half points. It's also true that within the same grader. So if I have a stack of student work, and at the beginning of the stack, right, if the same work sample slipped in at the end, I'm going to be more reliable in scoring that work the same for each student than I would be later on in the stack if I had more variables, so more gradients. I would not say that we have conversations with students and instruction with students that provides them the feedback that they need to get from a 2 to a 3. And they have multiple opportunities to process.
So there isn't a value in having the same scale for the overall grade for each individual, is what you're saying.
I think that is not going to give us, I think that would be an investment of a lot of time and resources that would not necessarily improve instruction for our students. I think that the scale that we're using right now is good for students and good for instruction and the conversations that we have with kids about how to get
Yes, Don.
Yeah, no, I'm done. I think the last thing I'll say on this is I would like to see how this is going through the year as we get through. I call it a semester. Is it called a semester? Mm-hmm. Yeah, as we get through a semester and to the end of the year and see how this is working out. I can see for a lot of students there is a benefit, and these are all good things, and I don't think anybody would argue that. Showing up on time, participating, overcoming hard things, working towards a goal, staying persistent, working well, like all these are good things that every student needs, and we should be encouraging, and there should be great dynamic conversations on. I think there is a group that this might not work for, and I'd just like to see how that's going, or how big or how small that group is. Just because, like I said, I think a lot of students would benefit from being able to do that subjectivity, but the ones that aren't, like, how big of a group is that, and what is it doing, and what does it look like? So hopefully at some point we can kind of just have a check-in and follow up and see like how it's but thank you for it. There is a lot of good work.
I'm just gonna throw in one more thing. At the middle school level, there is no overall course grade, and so habits of work don't show up as a percentage of an overall grade because there isn't one, right? And so for most of our students for 2 years, we will be reporting out on habits of work, but with no impact percentage-wise to a grade. So there will be 2 years of habits of work for most students before they will see an impact in their grade as we move forward.
Perry. Don.
I guess it's been said before, that the progress that we've made, I think, is admirable. I can certainly commend you. And before Remick spoke, I was planning to say that at the end of the first semester, it would be nice to get a report from you, maybe from some before, but I think it's going to take a while to really figure out how successful we are. I think we're all optimistic. But I think more important, and I'm sure we've all heard this one point in time or another, but thinking back to some discussions we had when we were on the high school board, we're always looking to see how well our students are prepared for what's next. And here at the high school, what's next? We talk about Are they going to college? Are they going to get a certificate? Are they going in the military? Are they doing this or that? If you talk with any of those people, whether it be recruiters from the military or Husky, place like that, they say, we'll take care of building on the academics, but send us people who know the importance of being on time, what the repercussions are of not being here regularly, what you do when opportunities to grow in your learning. And so if we are preparing students for the real world, I think this is a giant step, because it encourages dialogue. I liked when Principal Martin said, you know, you could sit down and convince somebody that maybe you were right and that they'd overlook something. So I really personally like this type of thing that you're setting up. So keep up the good work.
Thank you very much, and we'll look forward to an update after the first semester. Right. Next agenda item is the Vermont History Teacher of the Year.
Jason Barney, Vermont History Teacher of the Year. Congratulations. I'm going to share my screen, I promise.
If I can just start off. So thank you for your service as school board members. And I guess I want to ask you a question that I try to focus in with my students as much as possible. Are there any of you who'd be willing to reach back into your high school or elementary school memory and talk about very briefly a field trip that you went on in school? Anyone? Just volunteer where you went, what grade you were in?
Well, I remember I had seemed like 5 field trips to the Shelburne Museum. And of course I didn't appreciate it then. Because when we found out we were going to the Shelburne Museum for our field trip, we were like, hey, we've been there all too much. But anyway, yeah, so that's my experience. I think that was grade school, middle school, probably once or twice in high school too, if I had to guess.
Real quick, anybody else?
Fort Ticonderoga.
Fort Ticonderoga, no?
I went to a rural elementary school, 4 big rooms in the building. And one of the real things that we were told as we went through the grades, if you work hard and you do well and you behave, when you're in 8th grade, you'll go and visit the legislature. I think everybody went, maybe not. But I remember sitting up there, looking down at these people talking, arguing. At that time, they could smoke. Up their parts. And I remember saying to the teacher, I'm going to be here someday. Of course, everybody just thinks that's phony baloney, probably including me. But about 45 years later, I was chairing a committee in the Senate. So it was just kind of neat to think back.
So Dan said that 10 minutes would be about good. So I just want to emphasize with Tobe and with what you said and what you said, what is it about a field trip that you can remember 35 years later and think of all the teachers you had, all the notes that you took, all the stuff you did in class, all of the seat time. But what is it about a day, when you were in 8th grade or several trips to the Shelburne Museum or Fort Ticonderoga, you remember that specific moment in time. So here in school, I teach a number of different classes. Probably the one that I'm most proud of is the Abenaki and Local History course. And my objective is, and the administration is very supportive, my objective is to get the kids away from seat time as much as possible and to try to get them out into the community to learn and to discover as much of their history as possible. So with the Abenaki and Local History class, right now I have about 15 field trips that I take the students on to various locations, and I have prepared just a real quick slideshow on some of those locations. I want to admit that I play a little bit of a character in school too. I am very enthusiastic about history, and I want the kids to see that. So this is in the Shelburne Museum, and the students were curious if they, first the curious asked, what is that? Is that an old phone? And I was like, yeah. So students snapped a photo as I was demonstrating what the old phone was. I also want to put a compliment out to some of the venues that I go. A lot of the historical societies are operated by volunteers, and they show up out of the kindness of their hearts because they want the MVU student body to handle their artifacts, to see their equipment, and to show off what they have. So this is the trip that we have to the Sheldon Historical Society. I try to vary it a little bit where every semester it switches, and I think I'm good enough where I can have 30 field trips ready to go, but call on 15 over the course of one semester. So next slide. So this is the Highgate Manor. I have not been able to get my students inside the Highgate Manor yet. It is a goal. If you don't know anything about the Highgate Manor, there's a lot of local lore. Some of it is not true. I don't believe in ghosts. You shouldn't either. But,
I believe there's a jail there where people spent time overnight during Prohibition, though, right?
Yeah, so Prohibition is one. Another one is that that particular building, which is about 6 miles from the Canadian border, was my folks' 28th anniversary wedding anniversary was in that one. The Highgate Manor was part of the Underground Railroad during the Civil War. That is false. But by the time I know,
I'm so disappointed.
That's the local.
You lifted me up and then brought me down.
By the time a freed slave was this far north, there was no reason for them to be hiding in an escape or a secret compartment or a basement or something like that. Plus, there was a different hotel in this location during the Civil War, so the manor was built shortly after that. There's also the thing about whether or not the doctor broke the bones of his kids and all that sort of thing. It's local lore. I'm sure some of you have heard about it. The manor recently sold. I do want to get my students inside, but since it's privately owned, it's difficult to arrange that sort of field trip. So next slide.
Was Al Capone there?
So I didn't think Al Capone went, but when I talked to the guy who just sold it, he had said that when they were doing the research with the realtor about whether or not they were going to buy the property, that the previous owners did have a letter that documented that Capone had come. So do we know yet? No, but I had thought that was baloney, but apparently there's some legitimacy to it.
The previous owner was a member of the school board.
Yeah, Lisa Wells, right?
What's that?
Was it Wells?
Yes, I believe it was. She was on the MVU school board, served for a term there for a couple of years.
So this is the Highgate Episcopal Church. Father Rob, who was on this board for a number of years, he gave us access. Father Rob's now gone, and I have a continuing relationship with the church where they bring us in. The students love ringing the bell at the top, and this is a great piece to go over with the students because it's about what we should preserve. So a current event in Enosburg just a couple of years ago was that there was a church in Enosburg that was no longer in use. There wasn't a congregation, and I believe they tore that church down. This is one of the most historic churches in Vermont, let alone Franklin County, and the Episcopal Church is having trouble figuring out how they're going to fund a restoration project. So my students go inside, and if you want to hit the next slide, and they see that Vermont's history, or Franklin County's history, is connected to Vermont's history because those front pews, Ira Allen's name is engraved in the placard on them because the Allen family had a direct link to Swanton and Highgate and this area. So it's neat going into that building. Next slide. This is the Franklin Historical Society log cabin. That's Dave Benyon. Again, I develop personal relationships with these individuals. Dave's wife, Pam, great individual, just recently passed. And I have not had a chance to talk with him about scheduling our field trip for this fall. But as small as Franklin is, as small as the Franklin log cabin is, next slide. Typically, this is one of the locations that the students enjoy the most. And Dave bakes cookies for the kids and hides them in the stove on the inside, so the kids get a little bit of a treat when they leave. Next slide. So the St. Albans Historical Museum has always been really, really good to the students. This is the largest venue that we go to. It's 3 floors. They have train history. They have a military room. And it's neat to see that the students sort of get lost in the building. And then I usually have to rustle them up before the end of class. Because the other thing with the field trips, I try not to have the students miss any other teacher's class time. They're usually out of the building when the tone rings from my class and back in by the start of the next class. So, next slide. Significant Revolutionary War history, I won't go into detail on that, but if you want to talk about it, give me a call. Next slide.
You got a book you could talk about, right?
Yeah. Next slide.
Couple books.
Yeah.
Sorry, I want to skip over this. This is just
That's our railroad bridge.
yeah. No, this is the bridge that is at Highgate Falls.
Oh, yeah.
So what should be preserved? I used to live up the road from there. This is not the original bridge. The bridge was restored, so Highgate keeps it as a walking bridge. The students love going over the dam. This location has significant military history because if you know anything about Rogers raids, that's a French and Indian War engagement. The local lore is that the Abenaki cornered some of Rogers' raiders fairly close to the location of this bridge and enacted a little bit of revenge for the raid in 1758, 1759. So, next slide. So I can't let this one go. I want to talk about this one a little bit. This is in the St. Albans Historical Society. The placard, I did not blow that up, but it identifies how that cannon was donated to the St. Albans Historical Society. And the placard said that it was found in the basement of a barn in Highgate. And so immediately I think of some of our inquiry standards, getting the students to ask questions about their own history, maybe doing a little bit of research. I would love to find out just which barn it was found in, let alone how it got there. But chances are there are other artifacts like this that are still in Franklin County waiting to be discovered. And if I can get the students interested enough, then they can ask some of those questions too. So next slide. These are the Fortin Caves in Highgate. Danny and Karen have been great about not posting their property and inviting MVU students on. I just think it's really neat. And if one of our students is a school board member in 30 years, I think this is the sort of field trip that they would enjoy. And the local lore is that during the Revolutionary War, there were Hessian soldiers that had defected and hid in these caves. So, next slide. We'll skip a couple and I'll get to the last couple that I want to cover. This has to do with Abenaki history. Coding Hemingway has been great. The Abenaki in general have been great about opening up tribal headquarters and taking us down Monument Road. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so I'll end with this one. There's more material, but I don't want to keep anybody too late. The Riviera Hotel. I would say I'm very proud of what I did as a teacher and what some MVU students experienced with the Riv. Some of you may have gone to the Riv while it was an operating hotel. I had a group of students, next slide, who just became obsessed with the Riv. And when the Village of Swanton purchased the property, these guys found out through me, but through their own interest too, that the Riv was going to be torn down. And they pestered me and pestered me and pestered me. They wanted to go inside. And the Riv was not in great shape, but I told them that I would approach Bill Sheets, the village manager, and he said yes. So these students got a tour of the Riv, and it was not in great condition. I went with them, but that's the sort of thing that I think these guys will remember for the rest of their lives, that a teacher kind of went the extra mile. This is during the school day. Their parents said that they could go, and they've helped film the destruction of the Riv. But this isn't something that ends here. I'm not great with technology, but I've been talking with the school's technology department. Rich Ballard, he brought MVU's drone down, and we actually took 3D footage of the Riv. So now, with that question about what we preserve, this has been destroyed. We've captured the inside of the Riv with the 3D camera, and we've captured the drone. So it'll be interesting in a future class to have the students wear our Oculus goggles and experience what that looked like before it came down. So I'll end there. I don't want to go too late. But
and one of those students went on to join the Historical Society?
Yeah, Mason's on the Historical Society board now. And Caleb is a little jealous. I think he wants to be in the Historical Society board.
Along that line, the day that you did a wonderful presentation, there were MVU students there who did presentations about what they have learned, what they wanted to do, things like that. And it was really interesting because my wife had some of those children earlier in elementary school, so they're very quiet, would never speak up, nice kids. And here they are now in high school with you, and they're talking like they're into this history stuff. So it brings a lot of, sometimes these things bring a different student to the forefront.
So I know there's a discussion about proficiencies and grading, and I appreciate that, and I live in that world from 7:30 to 3:30. But I also see that a huge portion of my job is getting the kids to like school and getting them to remember certain things about their history. So I won't go any further with the pictures, but I want to say that I appreciate your support because field trips are not inexpensive. The field trips cost a lot of money, but I do think the students get a lot from them, and I think they carry a lot with them after the class too. So, and I'd like to think that this is a major part of why I got the recognition I did. So. Thank you for your time.
Can you go down a couple more slides?
So this is Bruce Spalding. We do gravestone cleaning.
Yeah. I love that you do that.
What's that?
I love that you do that.
Yeah. So Bruce is he's getting up there in age, and he has let me know that I need to take the mantle from him on this. I'll try to do that. But we take the students out, and Bruce identifies veterans' gravestones, and Bruce gets into it too. He didn't tell me that he did this, but he found my grandfather's gravestone, and he had the students clean my grandfather's gravestone. And I get kind of teary-eyed when he did it. But Bruce enjoys the students, and he does a good job with the students too. So.
I want to see the one with the crane. I don't know what it is. Next one, I think.
So the missile silos, the nuclear missile silos in Alberg and Swanton. I don't have as much access as I want. I actually went to Alberg. Does that sound weird?
No, it's great.
I went to an Alberg Select Board meeting and asked if the students could get a tour of what's left. And they said yes, but they said that I'd need to talk with you guys about having an insurance form to make sure that if anybody felt sick after, it was, so I'm thinking about talking to.
For visit.
I'm thinking about talking to Chevalier's, because Chevalier's own the one in Swanton. And I think Dave would let us at least have a walking access to the facility. But community members have donated these old photos of when those nuclear missile silos were being built or operational in Swanton and Alberg.
Wow.
There was one in Swanton?
Yeah. County Road or Middle Road, about a half a mile down on the left.
You even had an uncle that worked in one, didn't you?
Yeah, my uncle Armin.
Yeah.
He worked in one. And I like to talk to the students because the Cuban Missile Crisis, these Atlas missiles would have been active during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So as dark as that topic is, to think that the Cold War was so extensive that nuclear missiles would have been operational in a small town like Alberg or a small town like Swanton. That's a point that you can make with the students and connections to other classes. So in my research never ends, not while you guys were talking, but before. I've read this book for the second time. So if I said the name Paul Lawrence, would any of you be familiar with Paul Lawrence?
Sure.
So
St. Albans, Vermont.
Yeah, so I haven't done anything with this in class yet, but this year is the 50th anniversary of a cop in St. Albans fabricating evidence against at least 35, I think more than 40 people for drug use in St. Albans. They probably were marijuana smokers in 1973, and they probably were people who, they were a little bit too loud or they looked a certain way, but Lawrence framed them for cocaine and heroin use. And a Franklin County jury convicted all of them. And then he was discovered for fabricating evidence and ended up going to jail. So that's something else that I'm researching right now and I'd like to use in class because there were several people from Swanton who were arrested by Lawrence.
That was probably the biggest scandal until JP came along. There's another one for you.
So that's my job, and that's what I do with kids.
Any questions or comments?
And I pester Dan, and I pester Jen, and Christy's back in the building, so I can pester her too. Whenever I go on a field trip, I will usually knock on their doors to say, hey, do you have time to come? Because I want the administration to see what I'm doing. But they're doing their jobs too, so.
You went to the caves.
Yeah,
I had the wrong footwear then.
and we went down Wall Farm Road. We went down Wall Farm Road together.
Yeah, I went down Wall Farm.
Thank you for this. This is incredibly, well, informative. I live on Middle Road, so now I know that there was a.
So that's, Chevalier is well drilling.
Sorry.
Chevalier is well drilling, probably down the road from you. They own it now.
Yeah. Oh. Well, see, I learned something new. So I remember my field trips. I love the hands-on stuff, and I'm just really excited that our students get to experience that, and that we're lucky enough to call you ours.
Thank you very much, Jason. Really appreciate it.
Jason, thank you so much.
Yes.
Congrats,
It is
Jason.
well deserved.
I gotta go put the chickens in, so.
Skunks are prolific this year in swamping.
Yeah, they
Your chickens.
Yes, if you want chickens.
Now for something exciting.
All right. Our SR report.
So, Laura, I think you put together some slides, did you?
Yeah, what we have to say is really not as interesting as that, so I think we're gonna try to be brief and go through this. Basically, we shared in the drive an ARPESA report that was put together by the AOE. It was a wonderful attempt to assist us with all the school districts in the state with the intent of the COVID funding, the fact that we have to gather data and just report on how much money that school districts got, what they spent it on or budgeted for, and then how they're going to monitor that. So, but I feel like this report it's a good attempt, but I think it's a lot of information and it kind of goes around in circles is how I kind of found it. So just to summarize, in the beginning, it does talk about, the funds that we received as Missisquoi Valley School District, why we received the funds that we did, the intent behind them, and then the period of performance. So I did share some slides in the drive that kind of summarize that for you. Basically, we're at the point at MVSD that we are utilizing ARP ESSER dollars. So ESSER 1 is gone, ESSER 2 is gone, and we're utilizing ARP ESSER through the end of fiscal year 24 this year, and maybe a couple of months in the fiscal year 25. It does outline as well the budgets that were prepared and what MVSD projected to utilize ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 dollars for. I want to emphasize that these were very preliminary budgets when they were capturing this information, and they were budgets only. So actuals do look different. The intent of these funds was to meet student need and be fluid and to make adjustments, and then also complement other funding sources that we have, and we do work very hard to do that. So budgets do look different than actuals. Actuals I continue to report on and share in the drive and on the website. But basically everything that we do with ARP ESSER dollars since the beginning has had to be tied to recovery pillars, and I don't really want to speak to that other than the fact that the recovery pillars cover areas such as social emotional health, mental health and well-being, student engagement and truancy, academic support and achievement, and ensuring safe and healthy schools. So every strategy that we write, every single initiative that we have has to be tied to one of those pillars. It has to be outlined in the grant management system as such, and then monitored, and data has to be collected to make sure that we're making an impact for students. It outlines the fact that they're in quite a lot of detail actually, that they're using a theory and logic model to sort of identify that and reflect that work along the way, and confirm again that there's student impact and positive impact to student outcomes. So it does talk about that. Very important, again, I just said it, but that we do have to collect data on every single initiative and every single investment that we're making with these dollars, which I think is very important. And then that data is what is going to allow us to decide with the board what strategies we're going to continue as we move into budget season and the expiration of ESSER dollars, and then how we utilize not only budget but also other federal grant funds. But I think that in talking to the finance committee will be some of the work that needs to happen, but it'll be the data that the admin team is reviewing that will, kind of inform some of those decisions. So that in a nutshell is what that report reflects. And then for a little bit more detail as far as the financials and what MVSD spent money on, I did just throw some slides. It's MVSD ESSER fund summary. There's a couple of charts. I just basically made bulleted pointed lists under each pillar about what we spent money on. So intervention, tutoring, VTVLC online learning, professional development, SEL work. So just a little more information specific to MVSD that is maybe not captured in this report.
Do we still have students in the virtual academy?
Yes.
Yes.
Are they supported with ESSER dollars?
Yes, it's in the Vermont, the VTVLC, Don, is that what you mean? Yeah, it's a fairly inexpensive, right now we are using grant money to support it, but it's a fairly inexpensive program. And it's actually helped us bring a few home study students back. They enroll with our school to benefit from it. So it's actually, I think,
We don't have a teacher there.
not any longer. That was only during COVID.
I take it that the finance committee, I know they meet, I don't know if they meet weekly, but I know they meet regularly, look at the agenda. Are they following, working as you develop your plans for use of non-ESSER funds as we build the budget? What was that doing?
Yeah, that's the main topic of this budget
I
cycle.
was looking at some of the notes and I thought, well, it's better, I haven't heard much. Good.
Yeah, we have, I think we haven't seen concrete numbers yet. We're real early, but that's
Good.
on every agenda for sure. Yeah.
I think the intent for student success is to look at some of the data tied to particularly the academic and SEL work that we're doing so that we can talk about what we see as some of the high leverage strategies. And then that feedback loop then gets to finance and
So the plan with that, what we talked about doing was getting those recommendations and trying to figure out what we've invested in that we want to keep, what might go away because now we have a better strategy, or what was funded and simply isn't funded anymore, so we won't be doing it. And then obviously we'll have the conversation of what we want our total spend to be, so we'll have those things on the borderline that we're talking about. So.
Any other questions or comments on the ESSER? Thank you, Laura. Julie. All right, next agenda item is warrants.
The check warrants for August. We have accounts payable of $1,959,549.40. Payroll checks $58,594.76. Payroll other disbursements $502,047.30, and payroll deductions $1,009,242.66, and that's a total of $3,529,434.12. And I'll make a motion to approve those.
Thank you, Debbie. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Julian. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Do we have Kelly out there?
is Kelly there?
Kelly's on. She says aye.
All right, motion carries 8-0. Thank you. And then we have the financial report.
I did share some notes. I'm not sure if you want me to go over that quickly or just people have already reviewed them.
Did everybody get a chance to look over the financial reports? Do you have any questions or concerns, comments?
We still have money left?
We do, yeah, right now.
I guess the question are the expenditures moving forward at a typical rate? I mean, nothing that really stands out in your mind that maybe we paid?
Special ed, well, student service contracted services, which we knew were going to be fluid and we needed to keep an eye on, I would say are definitely growing. And it's based on student need, it's nothing, but it's something that we're really keeping an eye on. We've actually implemented an electronic or automated process in the office with all the administrators that need to be involved to make sure that everyone that needs to be in the loop is in the loop and we're crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's, but I think that's the one that we're really keeping an eye on. In particular, special ed, because with Act 173, there isn't that 56.5% reimbursement, so anything below 60,000, that's an additional cost. So just to make sure that we're aware of those situations, but contracted services in general have increased.
Some of that is based on housing movement in Franklin County. People move in.
Yes.
And out.
I would say that. I mean, we typically know about our current students who have a plan for a particular service. Sometimes a placement falls through and you look for another one and it costs a little more, but it's within a range. But kids move in, kids move out. They have different needs than we planned for, and we're able to manage it, but we have a really tight tracking system, which is really, I'm so appreciative for the system that the team has put in place.
I get calls, sometimes weekly. I'm a mom and dad with 4 children, looking for a 3-bedroom house or apartment. So I know if they're calling me, they're calling other people in Swan and Highgate.
Well, and also some, I don't know if independent schools is correct, but schools have closed
Oh,
across
yes,
the state.
Centerpoint and the Mosaic School both closed. And because there's a moratorium on new independent schools, there's nothing to take their place except what schools are doing themselves, which is likely something we're gonna have to do.
So that's totally out of our control.
And availability of staff. It's not just us that struggles with that, so it's,
Thank you.
I think we're monitoring it and managing it the best that we can, which is good.
Any other comments? Thank you, Laura. All right, moving on to committee updates. Ag committee update.
And you see that part that says FFA National Conference Support. So I'm actually here to help advocate for the FFA. Back in May, the FFA went and competed at the state competition. And we had 4 winners overall. We had a state winner overall of Vanessa Clare, who won the equine judging competition. And as a team, Vanessa Clare, Cadence Richards, Kaylee Fontaine, and Izzy Kane won the state competition. And at the end of this week, they go down to regionals at the Big E to compete down there. But by winning the state competition, they have an automatic invite to nationals, which is in Indiana at the end of, or actually it's the beginning of November. So the National FFA convention it's on November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, and 4th. Not knowing, of course, that they were going to win this competition, the money is not there for them to be able to go on this trip. And so we met as an ag committee the other day. Elizabeth came in, Elizabeth Sweet, who is the FFA advisor, came in and talked and appealed to us to try and get some support around having the 4 equine judging winners and potentially the 4 officers go to Indianapolis during that time. And she took a look about driving out there. Of course, you would need 2 vehicles to do that based on the insurance purposes, and Laura's well versed on this as well. Yeah. And Laura's actually ran some numbers on it, and it's roughly about $1,300 total per student or per person overall. So really kind of appeal to you guys to see if you would support this initiative of the FFA students, which would be the 4 winners and potential 4 officers and 2 chaperones to go to the National FFA Convention in November.
And I'll just add, for me, this is in the Ag Committee, this is part of a larger conversation around what does the board wish to fund and support as from the general fund in the budget versus is FFA responsible for as far as fundraising and things like that, and really trying to draw a clear line in the sand and understand what needs to be done and get ahead of that. So that next year, if there's something that isn't supported with the general fund dollars, then they would have time to fundraise.
So as one of the board members on the committee, Joanne, I don't know if you want to speak before I speak. We have a real unique situation here at Missisquoi Valley High School. To my knowledge, we're the only ag program that survived in the state of Vermont, the only one. I've been talking with folks about it. I talked about it 10 years ago, and I thought we were headed in the right direction. It was on the MVU board. And then due to some things happening at the state level, it kind of fell apart. But if you could hear the enthusiasm that our new teachers have, and we've struggled for years to get teachers. Ever since I've been on the board, you get them, they leave. Sometimes they leave before they even show up for the first day of school. So we're really in a good place. We are in a good place. And I don't know how many of you were in FFA, but I was. And I'm going to tell you, it makes a difference in some students' lives. So when Dan and Richard and the group of us met, we talked about options and helping the students. Students have done great work in the past with fundraising, but it's been a little less productive because during the transition to the teachers we've had who have come and gone to some of the new staff, that they don't have the money right now. But there's no question in my mind, if we develop a plan and they go forward, they will contribute. In fact, they'll have to contribute this year. So I think Dan talked a little bit about monies for state, regional. If you've never been to the Big E, go to Big E. This is going to be one of those Jason Barney's what he were before high school, and the national. So we kicked it around, and I'm going to make a motion that we use up to $15,000 of general fund money to support up to 8 students. And Dan will be involved in that, Richard will be involved in that, the teachers will be involved in that.
And 2 chaperones.
And 2 chaperones. So it'd be up to 8 students. We don't feel we have 8 that really qualify or benefit or show an interest, and we'll send 8. But as Laura pointed out very well to us, the per pupil cost goes up sometimes the fewer students you send. I think we said, well, 6. So when I'm putting all that aside, I have to make a motion that we use up to $15,000 general fund dollars to support up to 8 students and definitely 2 chaperones to go to this national convention.
I'll second that motion.
So we had, the kids came to present, I shouldn't say kids, the students came to present, I think, last year.
Yep.
And they went to a national.
They did.
Like, what's the difference?
It's the same event.
It's the same,
event.
it's the same event.
They came later because of the time of year. They came later to present what it was like.
But they went at the same time of year, just
Yeah.
the year before. But, so how did we fund that one?
They had a historical pool of money that had been used mostly because of the pandemic. Like, it'd been there for several years, and so they utilized that. There is still a balance in the FFA account right now of $3,800.
And 15,000 won't cover all of the things. If we want to send them to the state convention where they compete and bring home awards, and I probably should stop talking, but if we want to build a program, you have to create student enthusiasm. And you create student enthusiasm by getting them involved, bringing them to board meetings to speak, and commending them for doing that.
So the 4 that went last year were officers within the program. Some of them were officers. This year, she's looking to take some of the officers and then these 4 winners from the state competition. And that's why it's different. That's why there's more students.
I definitely think it'll help my only concern is, I don't want to use the P word, but I mean, there could be another group that wants to do a trip. And they could come to us within the school. This is a little different because they're winners. So that's kind of how I would want to justify it in my quest to be equitable.
Right.
So that's what I worry. Like we have a great drama club and a great fine arts program that I know does trips, and they don't come to us to ask for. So it's just gets kind of messy.
Toby, I'm glad you asked that question, because we bantered that around some of us. When you have an organization or a school club that's organized, and there's a state and regional competition and national, I think we should support them all. So when the drama comes, and some schools do support drama if they come to the board of proposal, the little regionals, and maybe we should look at that. But anyway, I'm glad you asked the question, because I figured probably it's on the minds of many people. But this FFA is the only organized club that has these competitions.
I don't remember the exact one last year. There was a couple of students that I think we supported going to Washington for a math competition as well. They were local winners, and so they were headed to a national competition, and we supported them. It didn't come to this level because the cost, there was some funding there for it. The hard part, of course, on this situation is didn't know they were going to win, didn't know they needed this expense.
But it would be possible then to potentially build this into
Yeah,
the
once we get through this.
Yeah, with the hope of winning it, but you may or may not win it, but yes.
We can manage it within the budget this year, and then next year's budget, I would hope we would fund, again, some up to kind of dollar amounts so that that Elizabeth Sweet knows how many students she can bring, potentially what kind of events they can go to. Do they fundraise for their jackets, right? And we pay for the trip, those kinds of conversations.
I think Elizabeth said in our meeting, if she could announce to the students, if you participate, if you were an officer, or you do these things, you might qualify to go to the national. That could motivate even more students to participate. Anyway,
I think it's not only participating in FFA, there's, I think the correlation between FFA and the ag program itself, and the correlation's probably not right, but the way that they really integrate together, which I'm just realizing, is probably different than a lot of other programs that we have. One is really part of the other.
Well, I'm sure we've had, I think in past years, we've had positions budgeted for that program that are never filled, right? So I was, kind of, we've always carried those funds over, or how, I mean, I can't remember, but I know that we've had positions not filled.
We've had time when we
That's reallocated to other things.
Yeah, it's reallocated
Part of our
to other
carryover,
things.
yeah.
From ag program, in the total ag program, which we should be looking at as we build the budget, if we keep the teachers and keep moving forward. There have been times when there were funds, even probably prior to Laura, which weren't used.
Particularly as we have the Art Besser revenue coming into the district, that we have some indirect funds, that we have some extra revenue. The time to do this is now, where when the grant funding goes away, it's definitely something that we have to be thoughtful about putting in the budget. You've got motions.
I do got motions. I've got Dawn who motioned it, and I got Joanne who seconded it. And is there any other further questions or comments in regards to this? Okay. And Dawn, you wanted to do, I just want to make sure you want to do up to 8 students and 2 adults.
You had a cost. You had a dollar value.
$15,000.
Up to $15,000.
And up to 8 students. And you know, it gets a little tricky, but Laura will work with Dan and the people to make it happen. Right.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Can you see Kelly's?
Kelly says aye.
Thank you. Motion passes 8-0.
Thank you. Thank you for
Yeah.
the students.
They'll be very
Leadership sign up. I love what Jason said, but you don't remember the day of that.
So, our lighting contractors for the giant lighting upgrade that's happening are working midnight shifts, basically 12-hour shifts at night to finish the project in all of our schools right now, so bear with the little glitch.
I was like,
As we get new lights.
Perfect. All right. Oh, let's see here. Next agenda item is the superintendent evaluation. So I just wanted to be really brief on this. It's not quite yet completed. But I did want to ask like an opinion when we do fully talk about it. I kind of I put together, and I don't see who gave what for answers, just so everybody knows. So, but what I did is I did a document. I put for each section the graph of the percentage, like 50-50, and people's comments for us to review. I didn't know if people wanted to review them during the next board meeting, or if you wanted me to send them to you in an email to review once I have everything put together. And then, you know, chat about it. I kind of want everybody's intake of how to go about that after. Because I can certainly send it to everybody to pre-review if they had any questions or further comments, and we can set aside a time next month before give Julie.
Next month, the board would meet with the superintendent to go over that, or you would meet with the superintendent before that?
I would meet with the superintendent after the board discusses it together.
All right.
Yes,
Thank
I
you.
want discussion with the board prior to giving Julie the review.
You know, I have to say, this was really a good feeling, not doing it in February.
Well, there's gonna be another one.
I think
Just a heads up, it's gonna, you know, the goal is to at least have, you know, twice a year. But, you know, also, you know, after her review, and we can, you know, give some general feedback of how this review process worked with, I'd like that input, because there's always room for change.
I think it would be more efficient to just let us look at it first.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, rather than tonight.
Yep, all right.
That's my feeling.
That's what I was hoping, and then like I said, I've got it put all together really nice and neat and very simple. You got your graph, people's comments, and then that way you don't have to go through all the thing again. So, all right, once I have that put together, I will send that to all of you.
We'll get a plan for October.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. And that's it. That's all I got.
The last vote, so 8-0.
Yep, 9-0. Thank you.
So they all have been 9-0 except from the very beginning.
Sure have.
Literally was counting, I was like.
I was thinking, who's missing?
I know, me too, I was counting.
Well, Rennick was late, so I kind of forgot that he was here. Just kidding.
Oh, you're terrible.
I know. Just gonna write back on.
You just didn't give him trouble.
Little jabs. Future agenda items, list for upcoming.
Yes, because it just says list instead of there being some.
Yeah,
I
which
will
is great.
say next meeting will be in Highgate. Highgate's got their own continuous improvement plan that feeds into the district one, and they have 3 teams that are focused on that. So they're going to talk a little. They're going to have some teachers, hopefully, that will talk to you about their teams and what they're doing there. So that's, I think, what we have for Highgate, and maybe some universal design for learning update as well. I'm confirming that with Yeshua shortly.
That's right, and that's September 26th.
September 26th.
You'll finish writing.
Oh, I did. I was under.
One of the things I asked about, and I think it probably was after town meeting, but I know that we eliminated a position in the business department, in the business office. And I'd asked at some point, hoping before we got into heavy budget, that Julie, Laura, HR, Bonnie would come in and say, these are our positions now in our business office, you know, whatever their titles are, and these are who are filling them. I don't think we've had a lot of turnover, but with the leaving of a part-time person, finance officer, so.
I had included that in the board report last month, I thought, with a listing, but I can share it with you again.
It was just a paper thing, but I just,
We'll just.
you know, I have a hard time sitting down, writing you an email with 3 questions.
Oh, no, you're.
But I'd rather, plus,
send it to
I'm
you
a firm believer, and it's probably a philosophy, it doesn't wash with everybody, but let's say I had a question that was really a good question, and you answer it. There might be 8 other people that could have benefited from that question. So, but anyway, whether we do it or not, but I just, you know, I see some, when I come in, I see some of the, I don't want to call them old timers because I get in trouble with that with certain principals when I talk about old timers. But people who have some seniority, so it doesn't have to be long, but just think it's a good team there.
Perfect. All right.
Can I just ask?
Absolutely.
So October retreat, is
Yes.
that still happening?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think we had talked about later October, right?
Well, I think.
October 21st.
Yes, October 21st.
Oh, okay, because I just thought like sports might interfere being a Saturday, so I wasn't sure. October 21st is fine. Maybe the time of day we didn't have.
Is it morning, I think?
All I have is October 21st.
Wow.
Okay, anyhow, I just wanted to put it.
How about Joanne, would you mind sending out an email and giving everybody's input, which is best, so that you can start coordinating on that?
Very good, Sally.
You're the retreat queen.
I know. She rocked it.
You are.
All right. So, yeah, good at that. Be great. All right. Well, Rennick, I didn't get to number 14. All right. So Rennick made a motion to adjourn at 8:11 p.m. And can I have a second?
So moved.
Thank you, Peter. All those in favor?
Aye.
Kelly? Perfect.
Both of them.
All right, both of them. Motion carries 9-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know if you